Time is a very difficult thing to pin down. There's a famous saying of St. Augustine of Hippo that when he was asked, "What is time?" he said, "I know what it is, but when you ask me, I don't." And yet it seems absolutely fundamental to our life. Time is money, we say. I don't have enough time. Time flies. Time drags. And I think we should go into the question of what this is, because in our ordinary common sense, we think of time as a one-way motion from the past, through the present, and on into the future. And that carries along with it another impression, which is to say that life moves from the past to the future in such a way that what happens now and what will happen is always the result of what has happened in the past. In other words, we seem to be driven along. You know, once upon a time it was fashionable in psychology for people to speak of man's and animals' instincts. That we had, for example, an instinct for survival, an instinct to make love, and so on. But nowadays that word has become unfashionable, and psychologists tend instead to use the word drives, and to speak of the need for food as a drive, the need for survival or for sex as drives. And that's a very significant word, because it's brought out, isn't it, by people who feel driven. I must say personally, if I feel hungry, I don't feel driven. Also, if I feel lusty, I don't feel driven. Because I don't say, "Oh, excuse me, but I have to eat." Or, "Excuse me, but I need to fulfill my sexual urges, my biological impulses." I say, "Hooray, I identify myself with my drives. They're me." And I don't take a passive attitude towards them and apologize for them. So the whole idea of our being driven is connected with the idea of causality, of life moving under the power of the past. And that is so ingrained in our common sense that it's very difficult to get rid of it, because I want to turn the thing round completely the other way and say that the past is the result of the present. Let us suppose, just for the sake of example, that this universe started with a Big Bang, as some cosmologists believe. Now, when that bang happened, it was the present, wasn't it? And so the universe began in what we will call a now moment. Then it goes on doing its stuff. And always, when any event that we now call past came into being, it came into being in the present and out of the present. That's one way of seeing it. But before we get further involved in this, I want to draw your attention to a fallacy in the very common sense idea of causality. That events are caused by previous events, from which they flow or result necessarily. To understand the fallacy of that idea, we have to begin by asking, what do you mean by an event? Let's take the event of a human being coming into the world. Now, when does